8. Have you ever looked at someone close to you, someone who always smiles, always says the right things, and still felt that strange, inexplicable discomfort around them? That quiet inner voice whispering, "Something's off." You shake it off, convincing yourself it's just overthinking. But the feeling lingers. It doesn't scream. It hums beneath the surface like a current waiting to pull you under. We all have people like that at some point in our lives. People who present themselves as allies but behave like adversaries the moment your guard is down. They come not with fire and fury, but with silence and strategy. They slip into your life when your soul is weary, offering comfort, only to siphon your strength piece by piece. The Stoics believed the world was full of trials, some external, some internal, but perhaps the most insidious trials wear human faces. They shake your hand and look you in the eye, but behind that gaze is not goodwill. Behind that gaze is a hunger for control, for chaos, for the quiet destruction of everything that gives you peace. Marcus Aurelius warned that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But what if someone is constantly trying to paint your soul darker without you even realizing it? There are signs, if you look closely, small ones, subtle ones, not loud enough to be recognized at first. But over time, they compound. These are not accidents. These are patterns. And if you're not careful, these patterns will tighten like chains around your mind, your emotions, and eventually, your destiny. The first sign is perhaps the most painful to admit. Some people seem to thrive when you are weak, not because they hate you outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, they watch, they wait, they listen when you confess your fears, nodding with just enough empathy to keep your trust. But they are not there to comfort. They are there to collect. You tell them about the imposter syndrome that gnaws at you when you step into a room full of confident people. You open up about a failed relationship that still leaves you feeling unlovable. You admit you sometimes feel like you're barely holding it together. And at first, they offer warmth, a reassuring smile. But soon after, those vulnerabilities begin to show up in odd ways, mentioned at the wrong time, joked about in front of others, subtly turned against you. It's not always malicious on the surface. In fact, that's what makes it so dangerous. They laugh and say, "Relax, I'm just teasing." But deep down, it stings. And they know it, because they planted the sting carefully. They fed on your openness and twisted it into a lever of power. You might start second-guessing yourself. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you should be tougher. But then it happens again. You share a goal you're nervous about, a career move, a creative project, a relationship risk. They don't support you. They don't ask how they can help. Instead, they scoff. Or worse, they offer backhanded encouragement. Just don't be surprised if it doesn't work out. It's a pattern, not a fluke, and soon, your vulnerability doesn't feel safe anymore. Not with them. They don't strengthen you. They don't challenge you to grow with compassion. They don't anchor you when your thoughts spiral. They savor the spiral. Your weakness becomes their comfort zone because as long as you're broken, they get to feel whole. As long as you're doubting yourself, they get to feel superior. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But how can you be your own master when someone is quietly eroding your will to stand? These people don't look like enemies. They act like companions. But in truth, they are quietly delighted every time you trip. And when you try to rise again, they are the first to question your readiness. Not to protect you, but to keep you right where they want you, doubtful, dependent, disempowered. You might wonder, why would anyone do this? Why would someone pretend to care just to hold you back? Because it gives them control. It allows them to feel bigger without ever growing. In your weakness, they find their strength. In your fear, they find their confidence. They don't have to shine if they keep you dim. But weakness isn't the only thing they feast on. Some people aim to rob you of something even more sacred, your peace. Your stillness. That calm center within that the Stoics spoke of as the most essential part of the human spirit. Once they disrupt that, everything else begins to unravel. They don't have to scream to be disruptive. They just need to be consistent in their chaos. You find yourself on edge when they enter the room. Your body tenses. Your mind races. What will they say this time? What mood will they be in? Will they accuse you of something subtle? Will they guilt trip you for something you didn't realize you did? You start anticipating their reactions, walking on eggshells, apologizing preemptively just to keep things from escalating. It's exhausting, and that's exactly the point. A peaceful mind can resist manipulation, but a restless one, a reactive one, that's easy prey. They push your buttons because they've taken the time to memorize the layout. They interrupt your silence because your stillness makes them uncomfortable. They create friction when things are calm, because calmness means they're no longer the center of attention. They need noise, emotional noise, and if there is none, they'll create it. You may try to keep the peace, thinking, if I just explain myself better, maybe they'll understand. But understanding is not what they want. Control is. And the more you chase understanding, the more they pull the strings of your reactions. What begins as a small irritation becomes a chronic state of unrest. You find it harder to focus, harder to sleep, harder to breathe deeply in your own space. This person is not storming your castle. They are dripping water on your walls, slowly, relentlessly, until everything inside begins to mold. The Stoics believed that our peace is our most valuable possession, that we should never give it away, not even to those who claim to love us. Because true love does not provoke, poke, and destabilize. True love holds stillness in high regard. It protects your sanctuary. It doesn't trespass upon it. But some people, they treat your sanctuary like a playground for their projections. And if you call them out, they act surprised. You're too sensitive. You always take things the wrong way. I didn't mean anything by it. These phrases aren't apologies. They're shields. Shields that deflect responsibility while placing the blame squarely on you. Over time, you might begin to question your own judgment. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm overreacting. That's when they win. That's when they've turned your mind against itself. And yet, through all of this, you stay. Why? Because they're not always like this. Sometimes, they're kind. Sometimes, they make you laugh. Sometimes, they show glimpses of the person you thought they were. That's what makes it so confusing. It's not all bad. It never is. But when someone destabilizes your sense of self, your peace, your emotional well-being, intermittent kindness doesn't erase consistent harm. The world doesn't always send us enemies wrapped in malice. Sometimes, they come gift wrapped in charm, in patience, in perfect timing, and if we're not vigilant, we begin to mistake poison for medicine. So how do we resist? How do we stay strong in the presence of those who seek to see us crumble? Like the Stoics, we must return to ourselves. Observe, without emotional fog, hold our peace as sacred. Guard our vulnerabilities not with walls, but with discernment. And when someone repeatedly disrupts our clarity, we must ask, what are they here for? to help me grow, or to keep me small. We've uncovered the first two signs. But darkness often hides in layers. In the next part, we will journey deeper, unmasking the people who don't just feed off your weakness or disturb your peace, but those who actively sabotage your growth and manipulate your perception of reality. Because the enemy you cannot name is the hardest one to fight. When we finally begin to realize that there are people in our lives who are feeding off our weaknesses and quietly dismantling our inner peace, the truth becomes clearer. They are not here to build. They are here to shake your foundations, to test the limits of your endurance, then smile as you lose yourself in the process. There are people whose mere presence unsettles your soul. You haven't heard them speak a single word, yet your heartbeat quickens. Your body tenses as if bracing for a storm about to hit. They don't need to say or do anything obvious. Their presence alone is enough to make you feel disoriented. Every time they enter the room, it's like your spirit tightens, waiting for the snap of a string pulled too tight. And when you finally react, whether it's a furrowed brow, a sharp reply, or a subtle step back, they win. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Tranquility is when you stop caring about what others say, think, or do, and only focus on what you do." But people like this don't want you to be tranquil. They thrive on your emotional chaos. They grow stronger through the cracks forming inside you. When you lose your composure, they smile. To you, it's the collapse of your inner fortress, the stronghold that once protected your peace. To them, it's just a game with rules only they know, a game where you're always the one losing. Someone once said, "Let them play their game, but don't become a piece on their board." But what happens if you never realized you were part of the game to begin with? These people don't stop at disturbing your emotions. They go further. They plant seeds of doubt and division. And they do it quietly, not loudly, not obviously. They whisper. They suggest. They plant tiny seeds of suspicion between you and the people you love most. At first, it's just seemingly harmless questions. Do you think that person really supports your decisions? Are you sure they're being honest with you? It's probably nothing. But doesn't it seem like they've been distant lately? You hear these things. You don't believe them right away. But the seed is planted. And if you're not careful, it grows. It takes root. It becomes a forest of doubt that you can't escape from. Suddenly, small things become sources of suspicion. A delayed text feels like evidence. A misdirected glance becomes a sign. You begin to interpret everything through a lens that's been warped by those quiet whispers. As your relationships begin to fracture, as the warmth between you and your loved ones begins to fade, as you find yourself feeling alone in the very circle that once gave you comfort, that's when they know they've succeeded. They don't need to attack you head on. All they need to do is let you doubt yourself, then doubt others. And as Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." These manipulators understand that better than anyone. They don't need to inflict real pain. All they have to do is make you imagine enough pain, and that's enough to control you. Division. That's their sharpest weapon. Not knives, not fists, but words, slow, acidic words that drip into your mind like poison. A small crack today becomes a collapse tomorrow. And once you've become distant from those who once grounded you, once you're isolated, they don't need to pretend anymore. Control is now easy, because now, you only have them, but it doesn't stop there. One of the darkest signs of their influence is when they slowly begin to lead you away from yourself. Not through commands, not through force, but through suggestion. Soft words that sound light as feathers, but weigh heavy as stone if you believe them. Try to be a little more flexible, everyone does it. It's not that serious. Come on, bend the rules just a bit. No one will ever know. They won't ask you to do anything obviously wrong. They're far too clever for that. Instead, they nudge you, just slightly, off the path you once believed in. A small lie, a silent look when you should have spoken up, an unfair advantage that works in your favor. The first time, it feels wrong, you feel uneasy, but they laugh, pat you on the back, and say, "You're growing up," and you begin to believe them. The second time is easier. By the third or fourth, you no longer feel guilt. The line between right and wrong begins to blur. By then, you've lost something precious, your integrity. Epictetus said, "It's not the things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." These people know this deeply. They won't destroy you with external chaos, they do it from within. By slowly changing your perspective, your values, until one day, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the person staring back. You were once honest, upright, clear in your convictions. Now, you make excuses for things you once opposed. You accept behaviors you once found unacceptable. And the scariest part? You didn't even notice the transformation happening. Because it was slow. Because it felt gentle. Because it came dressed as wisdom, realism, or even maturity. But somewhere deep inside, you know something has been lost. A person who truly loves you will never encourage you to go against your conscience. They won't need you to compromise your values to please them. But those who twist you into a distorted version of yourself, those people don't love you. They are using you. Stop. Listen to that small voice inside, the one that used to be clear and strong. It may be faint now, but it's still there. It will tell you how far you've strayed from your own path. And if you listen long enough, you'll remember who you used to be. The previous page spoke about how those who carry darkness don't just attack you with words or actions. They deliberately make you doubt yourself. Now, we'll explore the final way they silently, yet most deeply, destroy you. Once you begin to stray from your own nature, once doubt creeps in and you start questioning your decisions, your values, and your inner compass, they've already won. Not through force, not even through direct confrontation, but through infiltration, like a subtle poison slowly seeping into a clear stream. They distort the clarity of your mind. Have you ever felt a sudden shift inside you, as if something sacred was being eroded? Little by little, that quiet inner voice, once strong and steady, now begins to stutter. You second-guess your steps. You look in the mirror and wonder if you still recognize who you're becoming. That's what happens when you let their influence linger too long. When their negativity becomes a constant background noise in your life, it starts to shape the way you think, even without you realizing it. And that leads us to the fifth sign. One that's more sinister than any outburst or insult. One that works like a silent thief in the night. They never allow you to rest or reflect. To understand how this works, imagine you're standing in a peaceful forest. The air is still. The birds are quiet. You can hear your own heartbeat. This stillness is where clarity begins. It's where truth reveals itself. Now imagine someone blaring loud music, dragging you from one chaotic scene to another, flooding your mind with noise and movement. That's what they do. These people, the ones sent to derail you, don't just want your attention. They want your silence. They want your inner peace, your sacred stillness, because they know that in stillness, you discover who you really are. They fill your days with chaos. They demand your time. They drain your energy. They create drama, crises, distractions. They plant urgency where there should be calm, noise where there should be reflection. You're constantly reacting, constantly running, and before you know it, you haven't had a moment to just sit and breathe. Why is that dangerous? Because evil hides in the shadows of constant motion. When you are always in motion, physically, mentally, emotionally, you lose the chance to observe, to evaluate, to course correct. Your days become a blur. You wake up tired. You go to bed empty. And the worst part? You start to forget what you were even chasing in the first place. Stillness is where you connect with yourself, where truth whispers, where healing begins. But these people don't want you to heal. They want you distracted, exhausted, confused. They know that as long as you're spinning in circles, you won't move forward, you won't rise above, you won't leave them behind. They don't just want your attention, they want your thoughts. They hijack your mental space. You find yourself playing imaginary arguments in your head, obsessing over what they said, what they did, what you should have done. Every spare moment is filled with echoes of their influence. And slowly, without you realizing it, your mental clarity begins to wither. It's subtle at first. You feel overwhelmed, then anxious, then numb. You tell yourself you're just tired, just stressed. But beneath it all, something deeper is happening. You are losing your sense of self. The ancient Stoics warned of this exact danger. They believed that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What you allow into your mind, what you dwell on, what you give power to, it shapes you. Your soul is not static. It's absorbent. It takes on the hues of whatever dominates your inner world. So what happens when your mind is constantly filled with their chaos, their judgments, their manipulations? Your soul begins to reflect it. Your thoughts grow dark. Your outlook becomes cloudy. You no longer think clearly. You no longer act from integrity, but from reaction. And that's exactly what they want. They want your mind in a state of constant turmoil. They want your inner compass spinning so wildly that you can't tell north from south. They want you to lose the ability to distinguish what is truly you, your beliefs, your desires, your values, from what they've pushed upon you. This is the ultimate sabotage. Not through battle, but through erosion. It doesn't happen in one day. It happens slowly, gradually, until one morning you wake up and wonder, when did I stop being me? So how do you protect yourself? You take back your stillness. You make time to reflect. You unplug from the noise. You ask yourself hard questions. You sit in silence, not to escape, but to confront. You examine your thoughts. You challenge what doesn't belong to you. And slowly, you begin to reclaim your clarity. Remember, no one can steal your peace unless you hand it to them. Your mind is your greatest ally. It is the lens through which you see the world, the compass that guides your path, the shield that guards your soul. If you found strength in this message, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us grow, but more importantly, it helps you stay connected to a space of stillness and strength. Because no matter how loud the world gets, you always have the power to choose silence, to choose clarity, to choose yourself.